In 1919, Pavel Danilovich Guds was born in an ordinary Ukrainian village. In terms of life experience, Guds' background can be summarized in one word: simple. Regarding his father, Guds did not have many memories. His father was a dock worker who passed away early due to an accident. If this were Tsarist Russia, such a humble background would surely mean being cut off from culture. But in the Soviet Union, Guds could attend primary school for free. In the modest classroom of his hometown, young Guds discovered a new world. Inspired by his school teachers, young Guds had his first dream: I want to be a teacher. Guds had his first dream: I want to be a generation of children. In the Soviet Union of that era, the system for cultivating talent was rather unconventional. After graduating from the 7th grade, Guds, with excellent grades, was admitted to the Voditsia Pedagogical College. After graduation, he was assigned to the city's cultural palace, and due to his hard work he successfully joined the party, and was exceptionally promoted to education inspector. At this time he was just 18 years old. As a young man with a solid background, and a highly competent educator, the Soviet government naturally could not overlook such talent. Just 1 year after becoming an education inspector, the leadership approached Guds. Comrade Guds, due to your excellent educational abilities, the higher-ups have decided you will become a tank operator. Regarding this decision, the leadership's explanation was, right now the Soviet army is in dire need of cultured young men to serve as tank operators. Although you studied humanities, at least you are a literate person. Therefore we have decided to recommend you to the heavy tank school in Sarado. Although Guds felt this decision was quite illogical, but since the country needed him, he had to give it a try. So Guds joined the tank school in 1939. In the school, Guds quickly demonstrated his top student nature. His memory was exceptional, and he quickly mastered the military structures of various countries and equipment performance details. While studying hard, Guds also clearly felt the approach of war. In September of the year he enrolled. Following Hitler's invasion, Europe entered an era of great turmoil. The students began to actively discuss defensive strategies to help the cadets quickly adapt to real combat. A large number of veterans from the Spanish Civil War were sent to the school. Among the many instructors, Guds chose to learn from Ivan Vasiliev. As a veteran, Vasiliev emphasized to Guds, observation. A tank operator who wants to survive must always maintain a state of observation. You must ensure you spot the enemy before they spot you, and keep the advantage of the first shot in your hands. If your vehicle does not have an absolute advantage, the first shot can decide the outcome. Guds asked, what if I fail to identify the target before the enemy does? What then? Vasiliev gave him a cold glance. Pray the other guy is worse than you, otherwise you are finished. So when Guds, in a tank training class, suddenly fired at a pile of firewood, only Vasiliev did not ridicule him. Correct action. Pay attention to observation. Firing before the enemy is a good thing, but your observation skills are not up to par. Firing after a misidentification will instead expose yourself. During the busy training, Guds continuously adapted to the equipment. Not long after, Guds saw a new type of tank on the training ground. It was a heavy tank weighing over 40 tons. Name of the tank. Compared to other tanks of the time, the Kavik had powerful firepower and thick armor ready to pummel anyone who disagreed. Guds and his classmates quickly became full of praise for this tank. On June 3, 1941, Guds graduated with honors. After attending the graduation ceremony with the rank of lieutenant, he joined the 32nd Division of the Kyiv Special Military District. The 63rd Regiment was stationed in the border town of Lviv in western Ukraine. When Guds first reported for duty, he made a deep impression on the commander of the 32nd Division, Yefim Pushkin. Because after hearing the division commander's name, the 22-year-old Guds asked, "Is that the Pushkin who wrote poetry?" The commander patted my head. "Good thing I know your background inside and out. Otherwise, with a tourist-like question like that, the Blue Hats should be investigating you to see if you are a spy. I have no relation to Pushkin. He is a pillar of the Russian language. I am practically illiterate. Go report to your battalion commander. His name is Konstantin Zorin. He does not share a name with any poet." And so, Guds met his battalion commander Zorin for the first time. The two were of similar age, and their personalities matched well. They quickly became friends. Guds was ordered to take charge of a platoon and prepare for a new phase of the training plan. However, it was already June 1941. I believe everyone can guess, there was not much training time left for Guds. Saturday, June 21, 1941. That evening, Lieutenant Guds was on his way to his duty post. As he passed by the club, Guds heard the Polish dance Farewell to the Motherland playing inside. Thinking about how Poland had already bid farewell to the world, Guds could not help but chuckle at this dark humor. However, Guds suddenly saw a faint yellow star rising slowly in the distance. Then another purple star. Someone nearby asked comrades, "What is an airplane doing out so late?" Guds noticed an anti-aircraft gun somewhere nearby was firing. The smoke from the explosions filled the entire sky. Guds quickly made a judgment. It would not be long before it was shot down. However, everyone saw, in the smoke of the anti-aircraft fire, the plane wobbled, turned around and flew back. So everyone came to the same conclusion: oh, it is a drill. So everyone dispersed. The melodious music started playing again. However, as soon as Guds got to the duty room, the phone rang urgently. The commander called and said, "We have checked. There are no Air Force training missions nearby right now. Something's not right. Stay alert." An hour later, a roar came from the sky. Flares from the anti-aircraft guns flew continuously, with the approaching screeching sound. Guds followed the emergency procedure manual, and sounded the assembly call. All personnel immediately returned to the tank garage and standby. After assembling, the comrades were generally a bit confused. Everyone ran to the duty office to ask what was going on. Is it combat or training? Guds shook his head. I do not know either. But according to the manual, we need to enter combat readiness. A few minutes later, Battalion Commander Zoran arrived at the duty room with a grim face. It is combat. Those guys attack when decent people are resting. Good thing I was not asleep. The division commander has ordered us to load ammunition and refuel immediately, and head west. We are going to take on the Germans. An hour later, Zoran motivated the troops before setting out. Guds' platoon will lead. Sheeplev's platoon will bring up the rear. Let us move out. With the roar of the engines, Guds set out as the lead vehicle. The radio in the tank also crackled to life. The two armies quickly engaged in battle. Zoran's voice came over the radio. Latest news. The enemy is coming along the road. Guds, get ready to engage. Guds' heart began to beat violently, and he immediately gave orders. 2 tanks on the left, 2 on the right. My lead vehicle will be in the center front. Driver, pick up the speed. Remembering his instructor's advice, Guds widened his eyes and began to scan. Where is the enemy? There are green trees everywhere, mountains in the distance. A blue utility pole has fallen down. Wait. Why is the utility pole blue? No, that is a cannon barrel. In an instant, Guds slammed on the brake pedal. The enemy's cannon muzzle erupted in flames at the same time, with a deafening roar and violent shaking. A sour smell spread inside the cabin. Guds' eardrums were nearly deafened by the blast. After barely recovering, he quickly asked comrades, is everyone still alive? The driver joyfully said, alive. It is a Panzer I across from us. It did not penetrate the armor. Guds exclaimed with emotion. Heavy tanks are really damn reliable. Comrades, fire at will. And so an encounter battle began. Guds fired while observing the battlefield situation. He quickly identified the weakness of the Soviet forces. Our shooting is not as accurate as the Germans, although they had been trained, but without having experienced the era. The tense mood and the battlefield environment made the Soviet tank crew's shooting skills very poor, while the German army was just the opposite. At this time, the German troops had fought all over Europe, and were battle-hardened veterans, with extremely high marksmanship. If it were not for the Soviet tanks having thick enough armor, they would probably have been wiped out long ago. Fortunately, the tank's armor was indeed ridiculously thick. Watching himself constantly taking hits, Guds was so anxious he gritted his teeth. Suddenly he thought of a solution. Facing the driver, Guds gave the order, charge. As long as we are close enough, we won't have to worry about missing. However, the driver completely misunderstood. He roared, understood, and then charged directly at an armored vehicle. This collision was not only unexpected by Guds, but also by the Germans. That armored vehicle was directly pushed off the road and to the side, landing in the roadside drainage ditch. This maneuver earned Guds' crew a rare achievement. They were the first in the patriotic war tank crew to use ramming tactics. This collision reminded the other Soviet troops, and various tanks began to approach the enemy. Relying on their weight advantage, they quickly gained the upper hand. The German army was forced to retreat. After the battle ended, Guds opened the hatch, and immediately saw his battalion commander Zoran. The first battle was a victory, and the two happily celebrated their success. Along the road, the two quickly returned to the rear. Guds arrived at the divisional headquarters on June 26, 1941 to deliver a document. At this time, Division Commander Pushkin was being interviewed by a reporter. After reading the document Guds brought, Pushkin proudly said, "Come, comrade reporters, take a look. This is the German army's plan. Our 32nd Division is on the list to be completely wiped out on June 25. Tell me, are we existing or not existing right now?" Amidst the uproarious latter, the division commander sent the reporters to rest. After the reporters left, Pushkin's face instantly lost its smile. He said to Guds with a serious expression, "Tell Zoran, you need to move faster. The situation at the front is not right. You encountered a large-scale German force as soon as you set out, which means the defensive line has been breached wide open. They are constantly bombing our fuel trucks. They are also in a hurry. Now it is a race to see who can secure Ravaruska first. If we can hold it, we can plug the gap. If the Germans break through, they can encircle Vev and cut off our retreat." After laying out the combat mission, Division Commander Pushkin took out another piece of paper. "And one more small thing. I heard you guys from the tank school are all good writers. A small task. Maybe because my name is Pushkin. I have been asked to write a poem expressing our fighting determination to give to the reporters. It is a propaganda task. I do not know how to do this stuff. I have been racking my brain all night to come up with this. Help me polish it a bit." Guds took it and looked. The commander's poem fully expressed extreme condemnation of the Nazis. This emotion was so strong that the whole page was full of profanity. Although the words were coarse, the meaning was clear. But the words were indeed too coarse. Even Voltaire would seem refined and gentle by comparison. Guds could only say with difficulty, "It indeed needs some polishing." On the march, Guds and a few other literate comrades began to revise the poem, but they discovered, if all the profanity was removed, the commander's poem would be left with almost nothing but prepositions. It would be better to be profane to the end, so they simply imitated the Zaporozhian Cossacks' timeless masterpiece and wrote a poem, titled A Dog Awaits Its Demise. Listen up, you German executioners, Austrian bandits, exec hangmen, Slovak petty thieves, Norwegian murderers, Danish swindlers, Dutch ruffians, Belgian robbers, French violators, Italian clowns, Albanian fools, Bulgarian serpents, Croatian bandits, Greek degenerates, Polish plague swine, we descendants of the Cossacks. The Soviet people will repay you with all our might. We will use our sabers and shells to tear open your throats, letting you perish in despair like dogs. A dog's end awaits you. After receiving this poem, Division Commander Pushkin laughed heartily. These words are elegantly crafted. Publish it quickly. Just do not attribute such an elegant poem to me. Everyone knows I do not have this kind of literary talent. However, amidst the cheerful atmosphere, the situation at the front was continuously worsening. The military command ordered the 32nd Division to station on several roads east of Lviv to protect Lviv from behind. Strangely, the German army seemed to have little interest in them, and did not launch an attack for the entire day. Just as Division Commander Pushkin was mocking the Germans' inflexibility, news of a sudden thunderbolt came from the rear. Lviv has fallen. Yes, this was precisely the German army's specialty, a pincer offensive. With the fall of Lviv, the entire 32nd Division was already trapped in a Nazi encirclement. To break out Pushkin, the division commander convened a meeting of all mid-level officers. At the meeting, the usually rough division commander, in an unprecedentedly gentle tone, announced the decision to break out, and at the same time issued an order: gather the best conditioned tanks of the entire division. We need a vanguard. It must strike hard and fast in an unknown enemy situation, and lead the entire division to break out. Once the vanguard stops, everyone will be in peril. Ultimately, Guds was chosen as the vanguard for the breakout. To avoid enemy bombing, the 32nd Division had to charge through the urban area of Lviv. Guds led his crew at full speed, firing directly at anything that posed a threat. Finally, after sustaining heavy losses, the 32nd Division finally caught up with the main force on July 1st. However, the Soviet army's situation did not truly improve. Soon the 32nd Division was encircled in the famous Uman pocket. In the ensuing series of bloody battles, the 32nd Division's formation was broken. Division Commander Pushkin once again commanded a breakout. He gave Battalion Commander Zorin an order: gather all operational tanks, and seize the bridgehead on the Sinyoka River. That is our only way out. With the heavy responsibility of breaking out, Zorin led Guds to the riverbank, and began the longest day of their lives. The Nazi attacks came wave after wave, and all the tanks were eventually lost. After the tanks were destroyed, they dismantled the machine guns and continued to fight. When the ammunition ran out, they began hand-to-hand combat. In the end, during this human breakout battle, only a small portion of the Soviet troops managed to escape. Fortunately, besides Guds, Division Commander Pushkin and Battalion Commander Zorin were also among the survivors. On August 15, 1941, Guds and Zorin supported each other as they retreated to Moscow. Because their unit had been scattered, the two were assigned to a reserve unit to rest and reorganize. Recalling the battles of the past month and a half, Guds felt incredibly frustrated. As a heavy tank unit, the 32nd Division's equipment could not be said to be anything but advanced. They had a great advantage against the German army. The comrades around him could not be said to be anything but brave. Each one fought valiantly and charged forward. The commanders could not be said to be anything but experienced. He could not think of any major mistakes. But the Red Army was defeated in a bewildering way. However, Zorin was more optimistic. He would often comfort him, saying there are still battles to be fought. We will fight our way back sooner or later. The most important thing now is to get back to active duty and return to the battlefield quickly. The new appointments came quickly. For his outstanding performance in the breakout battle, Zorin was authorized to form the 89th Independent Tank Battalion. Guds became his senior adjutant. After the unit was formed, new equipment was quickly delivered. It was still the familiar V-tank. After receiving the new equipment, the 89th Independent Tank Battalion was assigned to the 16th Army. Its commander was also a seasoned veteran, Konstantin Rokossovsky. Before setting out, Guds had a special mission. On November 7th, he was to drive a tank to Red Square to be reviewed. Regarding the parade, Guds did not pay much attention to it. After all, the situation was extremely urgent. After leaving Red Square, they went straight to the battlefield, completely in combat mode. So when passing the Pushkin Monument, Guds opened the hatch, leaned out and took a breath of fresh air. This scene was unexpectedly captured by a photographer, and as the newsreel spread around the world, it became a famous historical moment. As for Guds, he was completely unaware of this accidental fame. Instead, he followed Zorin's tank battalion and quickly joined the battle. Due to the urgent situation, the 89th Tank Battalion acted as a fire brigade. The entire battalion was split into several groups to plug gaps in the front line everywhere. The unit suffered heavy losses. On the morning of December 5, 1941, Zorin was squatting in the battalion headquarters peeling potatoes. Suddenly, a messenger covered in snow burst and handed him an envelope. Opening it, it was an order from the brigade commander. The defensive line at Nefedyevo village has been captured by the enemy. It must be retaken before 8 am on December 6. Extremely urgent. After reading the order, Zoran immediately became anxious. What on earth is the 78th Division doing? Nevtyevo village is only about 30 kilometers from Moscow. If it is breached, everything will be lost. How could they dare to lose it? The messenger was also helpless. What you know the enemy also knows. The Germans concentrated 3 divisions and attacked fiercely for 12 hours. The 78th Division was almost wiped out. That is how the defense was breached. Zoran stomped his foot anxiously. But I do not have any tanks left. They have all been sent out. Even if I recall them, it will take time. I can't complete the mission by 8 am tomorrow. The messenger shook his head. This is the last chance. Right now the German forces in the village are not that many. Tomorrow morning the enemy's main force will definitely follow up. Then it will all be over. Zoran gritted his teeth and turned to order his quartermaster. The closest one to us now is Lieutenant Pavel Guds. Have him come over immediately. Extremely urgent. Not a moment to be wasted. 20 minutes later, a grim-faced Guds arrived at the battalion headquarters. He walked in and said, "You would better have a real emergency to come here. I did not even have time to rescue our surrounded friendly forces. So what is the situation?" Zoran beckoned, "Come in and eat. I have got some lard to go with the potatoes. It is delicious." Guds was furious. "You called me back just to eat potatoes?" Zoran gestured for him not to get excited. "Of course not. I was afraid you would not be able to eat after I told you. You eat first." Guds sat down and started eating potatoes. Zoran spread out the map. "Guds, look. This is Nevtyevo village," Guds said. "The enemy's offensive is very fierce." Zoran shook his head. "It has been lost." Guds immediately lost his appetite. "Lost? It is only 35 kilometers from Moscow." Zoran sighed. "Before tonight only our battalion can make it there. To be precise, only your tank. Everyone else is too late." Guds stared at the map. "I need accurate information on the enemy forces. How many men, how many tanks? Preferably with their deployment situation. There is a river here. I must cross it to launch an attack. If they are concentrated by the river, it does not matter if I perish. But if the mission fails, that would be terrible." Zoran said. "I already sent scouts to check before you arrived. The enemy numbers are not large, about 300 men, but they have a full 18 tanks. Fortunately they are all in the village, not by the river." Instead, Guds scratched his head. "A frontal assault has no chance of success. The enemy's numerical advantage is too great. We must sneak close enough to ambush them. This has to be done at night. The problem is the tank is too loud. Only a deaf person would not hear it." Zoran thought for a moment. "Then let us make them deaf. There is a patch of woods by this river. After you reach the starting position, notify the rear, and we will have the artillery lay down concentrated fire. The enemy is on Red Army position. We can't directly shell them, but making noise is enough. Compared to the sound of artillery explosions, a tank is practically silent. Then you will sneak into the village. The remnants of the 78th Division will rendezvous with you. If you are lucky enough, you can knock out a few empty vehicles during the surprise attack. Then we will have a fighting chance." Guds finally swallowed a bite of potato, stood up and said, "Then I will set out immediately. This time we can't be stingy with ammunition and fuel, can we?" Zoran gave a wry smile. "Take as much as you want, as long as you come back alive." The two embraced and parted ways. Guds stuffed his tank full of ammunition, and reached the starting position before dark. After a short rest, Guds sent a signal to the rear. "Begin the artillery barrage." A few minutes later, with the whistling of shells, thick smoke obscured everything. The entire approach was quite smooth. After entering the woods, Guds successfully rendezvoused with the infantry. The infantry company commander led Guds to the edge of the woods, and handed him a pair of binoculars. "We are less than 2 kilometers from Nevtyevo village. The bridge over the river is still intact. The Germans probably plan to use it to attack. They did not blow it up, which is a bonus for you." Guds looked carefully through the binoculars and counted. It was indeed 18 tanks, but the good news was, the Germans' level of alertness was average. Because the weather was too cold, the enemy was almost all inside the houses warming up. But even so, the 2-kilometer distance was still a bit far. It was hard to guarantee they would not be exposed midway. And so, Guds once again requested an artillery barrage from the rear. The time was set for midnight, preparing to move at the same time as the barrage. As midnight arrived, the second artillery barrage began as expected. Guds ordered the driver to move out. The lone tank charged out of the woods first, while the infantry followed silently. In the thick smoke and noise from the artillery barrage, the Germans completely failed to notice this unit. 1 kilometer the enemy did not notice. After crossing the bridge, the enemy still had not noticed. At 300 meters from the enemy, he could already clearly see the enemy's tanks. At the same time, sounds of music came from the houses. The enemy seemed to be celebrating something. In extreme tension, Guds silently recited the parameters of the Panzer I, while carefully observing, enemy tanks 18 in total, 11 nearby, 7 in the distance. The intelligence was accurate. With a bang, after closing the hatch, Guds personally acted as the gunner. With a huge roar from the tank's cannon, a Panzer burst into flame. A moment later, the second shell was fired, and another Panzer I was destroyed. The flames lit up the entire village. Guds stopped all thinking, and continuously gave orders to the loaders: Sablin load. Sablin load. Load. By the time the Germans warming themselves rushed out of the houses, 5 tanks had already been destroyed. Guds took advantage of the enemy's slow reaction, and continued to fire frantically at the German tanks. After destroying the 8th tank, Guds felt a violent shake. The enemy began to return fire they are getting in their vehicles. Guds shouted hoarsely, "Do not fall back. Charge forward, charge forward." This was a very accurate judgment. The K-tank's armor is very thick. A few hits won't be fatal, but if they fell back now, the enemy tanks would be a massacre for the Soviet infantry. So Guds had to advance under fire. With one huge roar and shake after another, the Kivik charged right up to the Germans. At this point Guds was almost deafened by the concussions. After destroying another tank with a right hook, the Germans began to retreat. Guds pursued and destroyed another one, only to find that his ammunition was exhausted, so he ordered the crew to stop and use the machine gun to suppress the infantry. A few reinforcing Red Army light tanks took over the pursuit and completely drove the enemy out of the village. Watching the sky gradually light, Guds opened the hatch and reported to the rear via radio. At 7:12 am Nefedievo village has been retaken. Mission accomplished. Long live the motherly motherland. While clearing the battlefield, Guds noticed a detail. The German soldiers were wearing dress uniforms, not combat uniforms. These guys seemed to be celebrating something and were not at all prepared for battle. Guds was greatly puzzled. Such a crucial position, at such a critical juncture, what happy occasion made them so reckless, to dare to be so careless? But exhausted as he was, he really did not have the energy to think about it in detail. He found a room and lay down to rest, not even bothering with the reporters who had come from the rear. This was a decision that Guds would regret to his core, because for the rest of his life, he was always clarifying a ridiculous rumor. According to the reporter's report, Guds's battle was a 1-18 complete victory, saving Moscow. This moment of journalistic flair was actually a misunderstanding. After the village of Nefedievo was recaptured, the imminent crisis for Moscow was lifted. Reporters from the military command hurried to the front to understand the situation. When the reporters arrived on the scene and made inquiries, good heavens, the enemy force had a full 18 tanks, while on our side, there was only Guds's crew and a single KV tank. The tank had a full 29 impact craters on it. What a fierce battle that must have been. This is a clear 1-18, is not it? What is this? This is the Slavic Superman. This is Captain Soviet. And so, after the reporter returned to Moscow, he began to write extensively. A few days later, Guds's story of 1-18 spread throughout Moscow, and he became a nationally famous war hero. But when Guds saw the report about himself, he was very shocked. This story is so brilliant. If only it were about me, it would be even more perfect. In reality, the course of this battle was quite complex. Guds destroyed a total of 10 tanks in this battle, of which 8 were unoccupied. The other destroyed German tanks were the results of friendly forces. The victory in the battle was a collective honor. In the many years that followed, Guds was always clarifying this point. Unfortunately, the effect of his corrections was limited. Due to the widespread media publicity, the award came down quickly. It was personally presented by Zhukov on January 17, 1942. Guds received the Order of Lenin, but Guds did not know that the award for him actually caused a dispute between two top leaders. After holding off the German company, Stalin was very pleased and called Zhukov to his office and asked him to tell him in detail about the heroic deeds of the 16th Army. The heroic deeds because the 16th Army was commanded by Rokossovsky, so Zhukov brought him along as well. However, after a round of praise, Rokossovsky in his excitement told a few stories, including Guds's heroic deed. Stalin listened with great fascination and asked, "Is Lieutenant Guds a hero of the Soviet Union?" Rokossovsky replied, "Not yet." This time Stalin was not happy. "Why is not such a good comrade a hero of the Soviet Union?" Zhukov immediately interjected, "No. I just signed the Order of Lenin for Lieutenant Guds. Adding a gold star now would be hard to justify." Stalin disagreed with this view. When soldiers perform meritorious service, they should be rewarded. Great service receives great rewards. Lieutenant Guds can be considered to have saved Moscow. He should receive the highest award. However, Zhukov still insisted, saying, "The Order of Lenin is the highest award." Being contradicted left Stalin very unhappy. He casually grabbed something from his desk and threw it at Zhukov. The small scuffle between these two top Soviet leaders left Rokossovsky dumbfounded, and it remained a vivid memory for many years. Regarding the amount of honor, Guds on the front line was not concerned. In late January 1942, Guds went to report to the brigade headquarters, but as soon as he arrived at the brigade headquarters, he received news that struck him like a thunderbolt. Zorin, leading the main force of the 89th Battalion, was trapped in a heavy Nazi encirclement at Ledonovo. Radio contact had been lost for a day. The last message was, Zorin was left with only one tank. Guds frantically mobilized all available personnel. With the cooperation of friendly forces, he launched the most ferocious attack on Ledonovo. After a week of fierce fighting, the Soviet army finally recaptured the position. However, it was all too late. During the German siege, Zorin had already perished. In retaliation, the Germans stripped him of his clothes, severed his head, and also pierced Zorin's body with bayonets countless times, leaving only Zorin's mutilated remains lying next to the wrecked tank. From that day on, the 23-year-old Guds seemed to have changed completely. The optimism and smile he once had were gone, replaced by silence. His style also became increasingly ferocious. He led from the front in every battle. Not long after, Guds was appointed commander of the 547th Tank Battalion, and his military rank was promoted to captain due to his bravery in combat. In November 1942, Guds was promoted again, becoming a captain, and the major deputy commander of the 8th Heavy Tank Regiment, and he was about to face a true hell. Stalingrad. In Stalingrad, all tactics lost their meaning. Furious, the two armies engaged in the most frenzied mutual slaughter. When Guds arrived, a comrade reminded him, "Comrade, be prepared. There is no distance between us and the enemy." Soon Guds understood his comrade's warning. Both sides began to fight over every inch of land, engaging in a bloody struggle. News from friendly forces kept coming over the radio. Some were requests for help, some were reports of success, and some were already in desperate situations, asking their comrades to avenge them before they perished. The long battle seemed to have no end. Even after becoming a deputy commander, Guds did not change his habit of personally operating the cannon, firing continuously. Due to extreme fatigue, Guds finally lost his long-standing advantage. Keen observation. In a certain battle, just as Guds was advancing, the driver suddenly shouted, "Commander! Enemy on the left flank." Guds instinctively turned the turret, but it was too late. With a huge explosion, the intense blast nearly knocked Guds unconscious. When Guds came to, apart from him there was no one else alive in the entire cockpit. He grabbed the radio, and issued his final order. Command transferred to number 7, continue advancing. Then Guds lost consciousness. When he woke up again, a doctor was clicking his tongue in amazement. "Major comrade, your skin is practically made of steel. 8 shrapnel wounds, with 6 concentrated in the chest, and not a single piece reached the heart." Guds gave a bitter smile. "I won't perish until all the Nazis are eliminated. When can I be discharged?" The doctor said, "Major comrade, you are not truly made of iron after all. I am afraid it will be quite a while." But Guds was unwilling to wait. He forcibly discharged himself in May 1943, and returned to the front line. After a series of bloody battles, at the age of 23 he became a lieutenant colonel and regimental commander. At this time he had finally fought his way back to the banks of the Dnieper River, about to return to the land of his hometown. The closer they got to the Dnieper, the fiercer the Nazi resistance became. When the troops arrived at Zaporizhia, near the hydroelectric power station, the entire regiment was left with only 5 tanks. An infantryman from the front ran over to warn, "We have captured a prisoner," who said, "2 Tiger tanks are hidden in the ruins of the dam. Be careful, we will go up first." Guds grabbed him and pulled him back. "If the infantry charges up they will just be targets. However many go up that many will perish." "We will go." The infantry shook their heads. "If you go up you will be targets too. Anyway, whoever shows their head will perish. Let us go instead. The tanks will be of great use in the future." Guds held on tight to the infantryman, who said, "I was going up the dam. Use your brain, look over there." With that, Guds pointed to a ravine near the dam. "That ravine is very deep. We can pass through it to reach a wheat field not far from the ruins. 3 tanks will remain in the wheat field to provide covering fire, and I will lead another one with you to charge over." After briefly scouting the route, Guds set out with the infantry. The journey was very smooth, until Guds charged out of the wheat field that the Germans began to return fire with machine guns. The Soviet tanks quickly suppressed the enemy. Guds's tank charged out first, and indeed reached the dam very smoothly. But Guds became increasingly uneasy. "Where are those 2 tigers? Why is there no movement at all?" Just as he was wondering, a loud explosion suddenly came from behind him. One of the Red Army tanks providing cover in the wheat field was destroyed. From a pile of rocks ahead a Tiger tank emerged. At the same time, another Tiger suddenly charged out from a corner. Before Guds could turn his turret, the enemy fired a shot that hit Guds's command vehicle. The Tiger tank was not a small fellow like the Panzer I. With a huge explosion, Guds's vision went completely black. After an unknown amount of time, he finally regained some consciousness, and heard someone asking him, "Comrade Lieutenant Colonel, are you still alive?" It was the driver. Guds managed to open his mouth and say, "Alive. I was stunned by the blast." "How's the situation?" The driver said, "The engine is damaged. The loader and gunner are gone. It is just the 2 of us left in the vehicle. Should we bail out?" Guds's vision began to return. "What about the other tank?" The driver said, "It was also destroyed. I do not know if anyone survived." Guds bit his tongue. "We can't bail out. Without tank cover the infantry is done for. Help me load, and take out those Tigers." The driver quickly finished loading. Guds prepared to turn the cannon. But as soon as he moved his upper body a sharp pain shot through him. Guds then realized, his left hand was stuck in a hole in the armor, exposing the bone, making half of his body unable to move. He could not reach the traversing handle. Looking at the Tiger tanks wreaking havoc, Guds gritted his teeth and said to the driver, "Oh." The driver drew his dagger. Guds pointed with his chin to his left hand and said, "Cut it off." The driver said in horror, "No. I can't bring myself to do it." Guds became anxious. "Stop wasting time. This is an order." The driver started to cry, "I can't carry it out." Guds let out a low growl, and snatched the dagger, severing his entire wrist. He did not bother to stop the bleeding, and struggled to operate the traversing arm with his right hand to aim and lock on. At this time that Tiger tank had no idea that the already hit V tank could still fire. So it had no defense, and was destroyed with 1 shot. After Guds fired, the second Tiger tank in the wheat field immediately charged over at full speed. Guds was still turning his turret, Both sides fired almost simultaneously. This time Guds was lucky. He hit the moving tiger, while the enemy failed to hit his stationary target. Feeling the rising temperature in the cabin, Guds ordered bail out, and with the driver drew their pistols and joined the infantry. After running out of bullets, he began hand-to-hand combat with his remaining hand, taking out 2 enemies. At this moment the roar of an engine came from behind. The last V tank of the regiment arrived as reinforcements. The battle was won by the side of a shell crater. Guds finally lost consciousness. When he woke up it was the same doctor as last time. "Comrade Lieutenant Colonel, congratulations, you have survived once again." Guds nodded weakly. "How long until I can be discharged this time?" "I am in a hurry to return to the front," the doctor said with a mournful face. "The good news is the injury is not that severe this time. You can be discharged in 3 months. But the bad news is you definitely can't return to the front line. You have lost your left hand and are not fit to continue serving. The discharge papers should be issued soon." Guds's eyes widened. "No. I must return to the front line." The doctor shook his head. "What more can you do if you go back? You only have one hand. Going back would be a lost cause." Guds refused to accept it. "Who says the disabled can't fight? I can even fight with a bayonet after being wounded. I want to appeal. Even if I have to write a letter to Comrade Stalin, I will go back." In the Tongliao universe, decisive action has always been the primary characteristic of a tough person. A few days later, Guds wrote a letter to Stalin. The letter said only one thing. "From the start of the war on June 22, 1941, my battalion commander Konstantin Zorin and I promised each other to drive our tanks all the way to Berlin. Now Zorin has been brutally killed by the Nazis. I am the only one left alive from the entire battalion, so I have a duty to fulfill this promise. I implore Comrade Stalin to let me return to the front line. Even as a quartermaster, I must complete this journey." After reading the letter, Stalin only wrote one sentence in response: "Remain in the ranks of the Red Army." In April 1944, Guds, fitted with a prosthesis, returned to the front line and continued to serve as a tank regiment commander. At this time, the troops were preparing to launch an offensive towards Odessa. Just as he was preparing his troops for battle, news suddenly came from headquarters. Marshal Yakov Fedorenko, commander of the Red Army's armored and mechanized forces, will lead a delegation to inspect. Please make proper arrangements for the reception. Marshal Fedorenko had participated in many battles and often went to the troops to boost morale. Guds did not think much of it, but to his surprise, after his usual inspection and speech, Marshal Fedorenko asked Guds to stay behind alone, saying there was a new appointment, and he hoped he would obey. Guds asked, "Do you think I am not familiar with the new equipment? It is alright, I can learn it quickly." Fedorenko shook his head. "Quite the contrary, I am not letting you fight anymore. Go report to the command department of the Armored Academy. Study hard, you will be of great use in the future." Guds immediately became anxious. "Why? Have not I made it clear enough? I can be a low-ranking quartermaster, but please let me stay on the front line." Fedorenko said sadly. "Do you remember your teacher, Lieutenant General Yefim Pushkin? He was lost in action on March 11th of this year. Now it is not just your battalion. You are the only one left alive. According to the information I have, it is very likely that of the entire 32nd Division, you are the only one left. Pushkin and I fought many battles together and endured many hardship. We had already made it through the toughest times, but unfortunately he was still lost to bombing. So this is a bit of a personal wish of mine. You must live. The 32nd Division must have at least one person see the victory. This is an order. You must obey." And so, with a bitter mission, Guds left the front line and returned to Moscow to study at the Armored Academy. Fortunately, his promise was ultimately fulfilled. During the Battle of Berlin, the Armored Academy organized a battlefield observation tour. As a student, Guds ultimately did ride a tank and set foot on the soil of Berlin. In 1947, Guds graduated with honors and stayed on to teach at the academy, and subsequently trained a large number of key military officers. Later, in the Soviet Ministry of Defense, he independently led a team specializing in armored warfare tactics research, becoming one of the Soviet Union's foremost masters of armored warfare tactics. However, surprisingly, in 1958 Guds suddenly gave up the armored tactics he had studied for half his life and began to study nuclear weapons instead, because he believed that with the progress of the times, perhaps nuclear weapons were the ultimate heavy cavalry. 10 years later, Guds became one of the Soviet Union's most important nuclear weapons experts, publishing hundreds of papers specializing in the study of military strategic deployment during nuclear warfare. In 1970, Guds returned to the Armored Military Academy as its deputy director and trained countless students in the Soviet military community. Finally, in 1989, he retired with the rank of lieutenant general. In a sense, Guds ultimately achieved his childhood dream of teaching and educating. On May 5, 2008, the World War I armored ace, Doctor of Military Sciences, and honored scientist of the Soviet Union and the Russian Federation Pavel Guds passed away in Moscow at the age of 88. In Guds's life, this old general experienced countless brutal battles, yet ultimately became an academic expert. It is hard for people to imagine that this prolific old man was once an iron-willed warrior who fought in close combat with one arm. The experience he gained through bloodshed contributed to the peace of the future. When people look back on his life, he has become a legend.